He survived 220 volts on stage and somehow turned it into rock history. Before the lights, before the fame, before the makeup that turned him into the spaceman, Ace Frehley was just a kid from the Bronx chasing sound and electricity. And maybe that's why fate decided to test him with both. Because one night in Florida, electricity struck back and nearly ended his story before it truly began. When news broke that the legendary Kiss guitarist had died at 74, fans didn't just mourn a musician. They mourned a piece of rock mythology. The man who made sparks fly literally had taken his final bow. But what most people don't know is that one of Kiss's most iconic songs, the electrifying Shock Me, was born from the night Ace nearly lost his life on stage. It was more than a song. It was his way of saying, "I survived." It happened on a humid night in 1976, inside the Lakeland Civic Center in Florida, a night that was supposed to be just another explosive Kiss concert. The air was thick with smoke and pyrotechnic haze, the kind of atmosphere only Kiss could create. Part concert, part chaos, all fire. Fans were chanting, makeup smudged with sweat, the sound of guitars vibrating through the floor. And then, somewhere in the roar of the crowd and the hum of amplifiers, something went wrong. Ace Frehley was climbing the metal staircase toward the stage, ready to launch into the next song. The railing, slick gleaming under the stage lights, wasn't grounded. He didn't know that. He reached for it just for balance, and in that instant, 220 volts of electricity shot through his body. Witnesses said the entire stage seemed to freeze. Smoke curled around him as his guitar screeched out a distorted wail, a sound that didn't belong to the song or the show. He fell backward unconscious, fingertips burned, body limp. For a few terrifying seconds, the spaceman was down, and the crowd didn't know if it was part of the act or something far worse. He later joked about it, his Bronx accent turning the horror into humor. "It was a very shocking experience," he said, cracking a grin he could barely hold. But behind the joke was a brush with death. He'd been knocked out cold, his fingers scorched from the voltage. He could have fallen forward 20 feet into the pit. He could have died right there, surrounded by smoke and spotlights. Instead, he woke up backstage, dazed and trembling. The band wanted to cancel the show, but outside fans were chanting his name, refusing to leave. And somehow, Ace pushed himself back onto that stage. Numb hand, fried nerves, pure adrenaline. The rest of the night he played without feeling in his right hand. But the music still came. That moment became more than a memory. It became Shock Me, a song that would go down as one of Kiss's most iconic tracks, and the first time Ace took the mic himself. The near-death experience that could have silenced him forever ended up defining him instead. The spaceman who flew too close to the light and came back with a riff that would outlive him. Before the lights, before the leather, before the world knew him as the spaceman, he was just Paul Daniel Frehley, a quiet, street-smart kid growing up in the Bronx. His family didn't have much, but they had music. Old records spun on worn-out turntables, and the sound of guitars filled the apartment like electricity waiting to escape. Ace picked up his first guitar at 13, a Christmas gift that would change everything. From that day on, the noise in his head finally had a home. He wasn't trained. He played by ear, by instinct, by something that felt almost supernatural. He studied the greats, Jimi Hendrix, Jeff Beck, Buddy Guy, not through lessons, but through obsession. Every note was a spark. Every solo was a portal. When he played, it wasn't about perfection. It was about feeling. And that feeling became the foundation of Kiss. When he joined the band in 1973, nobody could have imagined what they'd become. Kiss wasn't just a rock band. It was a revolution in makeup and fire, an idea so outrageous it almost shouldn't have worked. But Ace didn't just play a character, he became one. The spaceman, the cosmic wanderer, the cool, detached guitarist with lightning fingertips and a grin that said he'd seen galaxies you hadn't. On stage, he was untouchable, a blur of smoke, sparks, and sound. But offstage, Ace was the opposite of his persona. He was quiet, funny in a laid-back way, often shy to the point of awkwardness. While others fought for the spotlight, He drifted toward the corners of the room, guitar in hand, cigarette dangling, laughing at his own jokes under his breath. There was something boyish about him, something that fame never managed to polish away. Fans saw a rock god. His friends saw a kid from the Bronx who never stopped tinkering with amps, who'd rather make someone laugh than make a speech. But behind the makeup and pyrotechnics, Ace carried scars you couldn't see. The kind that fame doesn't heal, and success can't silence. The rise of Kiss was nothing short of a cultural detonation. By the mid-70s, they weren't just a band. They were a brand. The makeup, the explosions, the larger-than-life costumes, it all transformed rock concerts into something between a circus and a revolution. Kids didn't just buy tickets. They bought masks, lunchboxes, comic books, and lunch pails with their heroes' faces painted on. For millions, Kiss wasn't a show. It was a universe. And right in the center of that universe was Ace Frehley. His silver-painted face, his cool detachment, and those roaring Les Paul solos became part of the band's DNA. When he bent over his guitar and sparks shot from its headstock, it wasn't a gimmick. It was alchemy. The moment when a kid from the Bronx made the whole world believe he was from another planet. But inside the band, things weren't as electric. The same chemistry that made Kiss explode on stage began to corrode behind the scenes. Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley were strategic, businessmen who saw Kiss as an empire. Ace, though, was pure rock and roll, ruled by instinct and energy. The tension grew. Creative clashes turned into personal distance. What had started as four guys chasing a dream was now an empire run by two, and a guitarist who felt increasingly alien in his own creation. By 1982, the pressure, exhaustion, and battles over direction finally took their toll. Ace walked away. It wasn't dramatic, just sad. The spaceman drifted off, leaving his bandmates to keep flying without him. But even apart, his fingerprints stayed on every riff, every explosion, every guitar kid who picked up a pick because of him. In the years that followed, he found his own rhythm again. Solo albums, guest appearances, tours that felt more personal, less theatrical. And in 1996, when Kiss reunited in full makeup, it was as if time had folded back on itself. The cheers were the same. The fireworks still roared. But now, you could feel the history in every chord. The tension, the triumph, the nostalgia. When he stepped onto the stage at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2014, it was a full-circle moment. The spaceman who once nearly died from electricity stood there being honored for the sound it created. The man who'd lived between light and chaos, rebellion and redemption, was finally being celebrated for all of it. And for a brief moment, you could see it in his eyes. Gratitude, pride, maybe even peace. Nearly 50 years after that night in Lakeland, Ace Frehley revisited the memory with the same grin he'd always worn. Half mischief, half disbelief. In September 2024, just a year before his passing, he sat in front of a camera in his New Jersey home, posting a short Facebook video for his fans. The caption was simple: "The night I got shocked in Florida." The video showed a man at peace with his past. He leaned back, laughing as he described how the railing wasn't grounded, how the voltage had knocked him flat, how he woke up burned but determined to keep playing. "It was a very shocking experience," he joked, eyes twinkling, barely able to keep a straight face. It was classic Ace, finding humor where most people would find trauma. That clip went viral not because it was funny, but because of what it said about him. He had always been that way, taking what could have broken him and turning it into something powerful. He turned pain into art, fear into rhythm, and chaos into the kind of melody that sticks to the soul. Florida had always been woven into his story. It wasn't just the state where he almost died. It was a place he returned to again and again, playing sold-out shows, reconnecting with the fans who had first chanted his name back in the 70s. Even in his later years, as his health began to fade, Ace never stopped performing. In early 2025, he played Mohegan Sun Arena, and just months later, Jam at the Dam, both packed with fans who still wore the old makeup in tribute. But by late summer, the strain was catching up to him. On social media, he called it a minor fall. Nothing serious, just another bump in the road. Behind the scenes, though, friends noticed he was slowing down. The fire that once made him larger than life was flickering. When his tour dates were suddenly canceled in early October, fans feared the worst. Days later, their fears were confirmed. Ace had fallen again, this time at home in his New Jersey studio, and the complications were far more serious than anyone imagined. Hospitalized and placed on a ventilator, he fought the same way he had lived, quietly, without drama, surrounded by music and the people who loved him. His daughter Monique stayed by his side. His estranged wife Jeanette and his brother and sister all gathered in Morristown, where doctors did everything they could. For a few days, there was hope. Then on October 16, 2025, the spaceman took his final bow, peacefully, surrounded by family, leaving behind a silence that felt cosmic. The fall happened quietly. No headlines, no flashing lights, no sound. Just a moment that changed everything. Ace Frehley was at home in his New Jersey studio, the same space where he'd written riffs and recorded solos that defined a generation. He slipped, fell hard, and was found unconscious hours later. What started as another accident, something he'd joked about surviving before, turned out to be the beginning of the end. He was rushed to the hospital, placed on a ventilator, and surrounded by the hum of machines instead of amplifiers. For days, the world waited. Friends, fans, and fellow musicians flooded social media with prayers and memories. But as the week went on, the updates grew quieter. On October 16th, the silence became final. Ace Frehley, the man who turned electricity into art, was gone at 74, passing peacefully in Morristown, surrounded by his family. His family's statement carried the kind of emotion that felt larger than words. The magnitude of his passing is of epic proportions. They called his final moments peaceful, saying he left this world surrounded by love, with gentle words, prayers, and memories of everything he'd built. Behind the public grief was a more complicated private life. He had one great love, Jeanette Trerotola, whom he married in 1978, when Kiss was at its loudest. Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley performed at their wedding, makeup-free but unmistakable. They had a daughter, Monique, who would later become his anchor, the one person who never stopped seeing the man behind the legend. But fame, distance, and time eroded the marriage. Ace and Jeanette grew apart, and though they never fully reconciled, she was there when it mattered most, at the end. In later years, Ace found companionship again with Lara Cove, a relationship he described on stage as beautiful but human. "We decided to part our ways," he told a crowd, his tone both raw and forgiving. "She's happy. I'm happy. Things go south, that's reality." Even in heartbreak, he found rhythm, the same kind he'd once found in chaos. Through it all, one constant remained: his daughter. Monique was there through the tours, the fame, the recovery, and the final days. In his last months, he posted old photos of them together, laughing, goofing off, father and daughter against the world. One fan commented, "She's beautiful, and I know you're proud." Ace replied with nothing but a smile emoji. Maybe that was his way of saying everything he needed to. The news of Ace Frehley's passing hit the music world like a thunderclap. Within hours, tributes began pouring in from every corner of rock history. From the bandmates who knew him best to the guitarists who'd spent their teenage years studying his solos note by note. Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, the men who had once shared stages, headlines, and endless nights of pyrotechnic chaos with him, released a joint statement that cut through decades of tension and nostalgia. "We are devastated by the passing of Ace Frehley," they wrote. "He was an essential and irreplaceable rock soldier during some of the most formative, foundational chapters of the band and its history. He is and will always be a part of Kiss's legacy." Those words, from two men known for their iron control over the Kiss brand, said everything. Whatever differences had once separated them vanished in the shadow of loss. Fans flooded the comments with photos, memories, and tears. Black and silver face paint smeared under their eyes. For many, it felt like the end of an era that could never be recreated. Bret Michaels, frontman of Poison and a longtime friend, posted a photo of the two of them laughing backstage. "Ace, my brother," he wrote, "thank you for the years of great music, the festivals, and the moments we'll never forget." His words carried the warmth of someone who had shared the road, the chaos, and the late-night laughter that defined the rock life. Pearl Jam's guitarist Mike McCready, one of the many who had idolized Ace growing up, shared a memory that hit differently. "I got a guitar in 1978 because of Ace Frehley," he wrote. "His solos, his attitude, his energy, he changed my life. When we jammed together at Madison Square Garden, it felt like coming full circle." His post included a photo of him, Eddie Vedder, and Ace side by side, 3 generations of rock, bound by one man's electricity. Bruce Kulick, who carried Kiss's torch in later years, called Ace's passing devastating to the world of rock. He wrote, "He was one of a kind, an iconic player whose style can never be duplicated. He influenced millions, myself included. Rest in peace, my friend." Even institutions joined the chorus. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame posted a video clip from Ace's 2014 induction speech, where he had said with a grin, "If I can do it, anyone can." Their caption read, "A crucial part of a band that inspired generations of hard rockers to pick up instruments. Space Ace will be remembered as one of the most recognizable and influential guitarists of all time." And then came the most bittersweet tribute of all. From the Kennedy Center itself, Ace had been slated to attend the December 2025 ceremony, where Kiss would be honored alongside George Strait, Gloria Gaynor, Sylvester Stallone, and Michael Crawford. It would have been the first time in decades the original lineup stood together under one roof. Instead, the Kennedy Center confirmed that Frehley would be honored posthumously, calling him a true original who expanded the boundaries of rock theatrics and left an indelible mark on American culture. It's rare for an artist to be both larger than life and deeply human at the same time. But that's what Ace Frehley managed. From smoky clubs to sold-out arenas, from near death to legendary rebirth, he gave the world something that can't be manufactured: authenticity. Looking back now, "Shock Me" feels almost prophetic. The sound of a man wrestling with the very thing that nearly killed him, and turning it into art that would outlive him by decades. Electricity didn't just flow through Ace Frehley's fingers. It defined his entire life. It powered his music, his persona, even his survival. The same voltage that once dropped him on a stage in Florida became the current that carried him into rock immortality. Every time a kid plugs in a guitar and tries to mimic that soaring, spacey solo from "Shock Me," they're tapping into that same current. Not just the notes, but the spirit. Because Ace wasn't just playing the guitar, he was playing with energy itself, bending chaos into rhythm, danger into beauty. His riffs didn't just make people move. They made them believe. He inspired generations of musicians who saw themselves in his imperfections. He wasn't polished or perfect or pristine. He was raw, all heart, all spark, all instinct. And that's why he mattered. Every blister on his hand, every burned fingertip, every missed note was proof that greatness doesn't come from control. It comes from courage. From picking yourself up after 220 volts knock you down and saying, "Let's play one more song." Ace Frehley lived his life like one long solo. Loud, unpredictable, a little messy but unforgettable. He was the living embodiment of rock's most sacred truth: that sometimes the best way to feel alive is to dance with danger and trust the music to catch you. And maybe the real shock was that a man who played with fire his whole life managed to turn lightning into music and left sparks that will never fade.